Hello, welcome to Monday Musings for the 26th of July. This week I watch a musical parody, read a book about regrets, drink a witching hour themed cocktail, and listen to a chat about tango. This week I have been watching Schmigadoon, a series that parodies 1940s musicals. The musical numbers go on a bit long and don't illuminate you as to what's going on, or as one Google review put it, imagine a Greek tragedy where the chorus didn't function. The tone is fun rather than funny, that I think they were aiming for. But as I said at the start, if you're after a bit of light-hearted escapism, it will do just nicely. The dances are probably my favourite part. I love dance, something that I will pick up on later in this video. There are many references and tributes to dances of musicals gone by, such as the dance for Corn Puddin', which is based on a few different 1940s dances. And for the record, my favourite dance is this one, which I've linked to in the newsletter, from Hellzaboppin'. This week I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. It was a very well written and compelling story. The plot revolves around the protagonist Nora Seed, who tries to end her life and in doing so ends up in this room full of books that contain stories of her life that could have been but didn't because she made one decision or another, and her old school librarian is there as her guide to this room full of infinite stories. This is quite a profound thing to ponder for many of us. There are so many decisions that we make that lead us to think, what if I had done things differently? Or as I said to a friend recently, I think I think I'm questioning my life decisions. And they said, oh, well, yes, I know all about that. My words of solace at that point were that, it's difficult to screw up life too badly, by which I meant that, there's always one way that you can reverse course or do something completely different. I would also add now that a desire to wind back the clock is often misguided, and this is something the book explores. All the times we have left jobs or partners or whatever we've left behind. In hindsight, we are thinking that we should have stayed. We often look back with, rosy glasses. But, usually in doing so, we forget the reason why we left that place in the first place. And it's actually a very healthy attitude to look back and see the good things, particularly in a relationship. But you should also be deluded that, things could have ended differently or could have been different if you had stayed with that person. Of course, like lots of the way we think about relationships these days is very much like the grass is greener. But if you're a healthy person, then thinking only of the good things about someone can lead to those kinds of relationships we all know of couples that are on again, off again, constantly breaking up, and then thinking it would be better if they got back together and then they break up again. So yeah, it's not like a kind of a useful way of thinking about the world to constantly think that you should have stayed somewhere where you had decided to leave at one point. Nora finds this out by experiencing the fruits of her alternate decisions, that basically all lives contain some good and some bad. And even the ones that are good don't seem to fit properly. Through living out the alternative lives, the book that contains all of her regrets begin to empty its pages. One of my favorite things to remind myself is, if you feel guilty, can you change something? If there's nothing you can change, why feel guilty? That would work just as well with regrets. If there is something niggling at you from the past, is there anything you can do to change that? If not, then there's no point in feeling regret. I have paired this book with the Midnight Cocktail, which is, the recipe is courtesy of the Drink Kings. You can see their website in my newsletter and have a look at the cocktail recipe. Obviously, Midnight Library and Midnight Cocktail. And yeah, so that's the story of the Midnight Library. I have been listening to the Dark Horse podcast, specifically the episode with Iona Italia, and obviously Bret Weinstein is the host. If you don't know who Bret Weinstein is, please just Google his story about how he and his wife Heather was excommunicated from the university, Evergreen State College, I think it was, in the US. It has become kind of a household story, so yeah, just Google that, please. And the main discussion that's had on the Dark Horse podcast recently has been mostly around COVID, some of which has been quite controversial in, former intellectual dark web circles, but I think it's a very valuable discussion. But that's not what I'm going to focus on today. I'm focusing on the episode that was released back in May. So it's a bit of a wait. I have, waited a bit of a time to listen to it, but I finally did, and it was definitely worthwhile. Iona Italia is the editor of Aereo magazine. It's one of my go-tos for long-form commentary, etc. And actually, some of my favorite pieces on Aereo are the ones written by Heather, who is Bret Weinstein's wife. Iona is also an author of a series of tango books, and has a series of videos of her performing the Argentine tango, which you can look at on the newsletter and on YouTube. Something that is noteworthy, although I had already known this, that the Argentine tango versus the ballroom tango are very different dances. Argentine tango is a folk dance, and something that is discussed in this podcast, is that men should get into dancing. And I've often thought that folk dances would be the best way to do that, because A, they're meant to be performed by ordinary chums, so they're much easier. And secondly, because I don't know if this is just my observation, but I think that the folk dances tend to have very kind of the gender roles that tend to be very much like the man part, the masculine part is very manly, very masculine, and the female part is very feminine. There's very much I think that's my observation, that the more modern the dance, the more kind of equal the roles are, and also because it's more athletic, I guess, as well. I mean, I really love jazz age dances, but even then, if you look at jazz dances from the 1920s onwards, there's already starting to be this kind of equal roles between the sexes. You can have a look at my favorite dance in the watching section to illustrate my point here. Probably the most archetypal example of a folk dance where the roles are very clear is the Georgian dances. The men's dance is probably the most famous, which is the sword fighting dance. But then there's also these, partner dances where the men are very warrior and the women are these floating clouds of you'd think they were on wheels the way they move. So yeah, there's some examples in the newsletter of what a Georgian folk dance looks like. I think one of the most valuable points of this is that they talk about the value of partner dancing in a culture through the lens of the Argentine tango, obviously. Brett sees this lack of a partner dancing tradition as a real loss, which I would happily agree with, and how it we've done away with a lot of the traditions around courting and interactions between the sexes, and have nothing to replace them with. What have we gained by doing away with partner dancing? This is where Iona really describes very charmingly the way in which you select a dance partner in when you dance Argentine tango. I'm not going to spoil that for you. You're just going to have to listen to it, because it is very much a charming way of interacting. And I think this is really significant in this day and age when we have so much bitterness between the sexes, particularly if you look at the discussions, and I often dip into the discussions that I've had in the manosphere, and particularly this whining. It is actually a valuable whine, because they're not onto nothing about the dynamics that happen in Tinder. And here I have to give myself a self-promotion, because I have a forthcoming article precisely about the Tinder dynamics, which you can have a look at on the newsletter. But yeah, they don't seem to realize that the great equalizer, there's all this kind of discussion about the jaw shape and the that you need a six-pack and a six figures and blah 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 blah. But the thing that really gets women, if you want, is creative intelligence, particularly if you read The Mating Mind by Geoffrey Miller. And one of the great equalizers between the sexes is the information that women can get from men through a partner dance. I mean, a lot of what women look for, like charm and these sorts of things, are transmitted through this medium, but you cannot see that about a man on his Tinder profile, for instance. So I think definitely if men are kind of struggling to get a woman, partner dancing is really great, not only because it conveys this information that is so majorly selective for females, and it also reverses the dynamic, because the amount of women that are going to the dances these days, at least, is way outnumbers men so often as the women that are sitting in the corner somewhere, not being invited to dance, left on the shelf, because there's not enough men to go around. So take up partner dancing if you're struggling to find a partner. Now, if only people can recommend a similar space to partner dancing for women, that would be great. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this this installment of the Monday Musings newsletter that I put out. If you did, please share it and do all that jazz. Thank you. Bye.